Welcome back to another episode of Travel Ball Talk. I'm your host, Rich Prado, owner of Play in School. Today we're heading down to meet with my new best friend, my BFF, Jeff Auterson from Auterson Baseball and the Georgia Jackets. Man, Jeff, we could be doing this every week without the recording, talking about life, baseball, camping, children, kids, family, you name it. But today we're going to we might talk about all 17 of those things, but we're going to try and talk baseball. Coach, how you doing, man? How you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we spoke a couple weeks ago. You know what was supposed to be a 7-second conversation to say hello turned into a 70-minute conversation where we just got after everything, and so I'm hoping that today's conversation can flow a little bit like that one.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Tell us first of all, where are you currently located? Tell us about where is Auterson Baseball?
All right, so we're located in, I would say, generally Milton, Georgia, Alpharetta, Milton, the Milton area.
Okay, Alpharetta, I recognize. Milton, I don't. So that's the Atlanta sort of area, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, north. I mean, at Milton, it's a small section of Alpharetta. It used to be all Alpharetta, then they created a Milton area. So Alpharetta is generally the home base of all our operations, our fields and facilities.
Got it. I got a handful of contacts, friends, buddies, acquaintances that are in that same area, and we had a guest on the podcast recently that he said a phrase that has stuck with me, that he referred to your area as the Silicon Valley of travel baseball. And man,
fair.
It was totally fair. It just hit me right between the eyes. So you're mixed in there with a lot of the top dogs. You've got stiff competition down there.
No doubt. It's a mecca, man. Everybody comes down with all the big, facilities with East Cobb, and you got PBR down at Lake Point. I mean, the resources here, everybody generally travels here to play, which is great for us, right?
No
In
kidding.
terms of us, our family's not having to travel around, but it's also a mecca, right? There's nothing but organizations and facilities popping up all over the place, and it just kind of comes down to any and all facilities, which is part of the reason why we kind of engaged our original conversation. It's about what makes each organization unique in their own way, right? Each one should have their secret sauce besides baseball. And the thing is what is yours and what are you serving to the people out there in terms of the baseball community? And that's kind of what I'm trying. That's kind of where I've been tracking down to try to discover what makes us unique in the game of baseball and what we can serve the youth, the community, and all that kind of good stuff. So we've got a pretty good foothold, man. We've been here for about 20 years, and it's been awesome.
Wow. Before we get into the secret sauce, let's go back in time. You're not from Georgia. You're not an East Coaster. Tell us about your upbringing. Where are you from, and how'd you get from there to here?
So I'm from Southern California. Grew up in Riverside. Got drafted out of high school by the Dodgers, and then that kind of pulled me out of that realm of where I grew up and, culture and identity and how I saw the world. And then fortunate enough, I traveled around, played. My 5th year, I got picked up by Colorado, played with Colorado for a year, and my sister lived in Alpharetta. So when I decided to retire, which is its own story in its own way in terms of me getting to that place where I could mentally leave the game that I identified myself as, right? Does that make sense? Like, I think every athlete sits in that realm, and when you're a baseball player, that's exactly who you are, and that's exactly what you do. So exiting the game was its own trial, kind of trial through fire myself. But my sister lived in Alpharetta, so when I retired, she came and picked me up. I came and visited her, and then that was kind of the beginning launching of Auterson Baseball, which started off with lessons, clinics, camps, etc. And then it migrated into the Jackets. So it's a pretty cool story. I mean, a couple of kids in the block played baseball. It rained one day, and they took me over to an indoor facility. And, back in Southern California, it never rained, right? So there was no indoor facilities. And then when I go into this indoor facility, I saw people coaching and teaching. And I thought to myself, people actually pay for this?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Because growing up the way I grew up, I mean, there was nobody coaching or teaching you. You were either good or you weren't. That was it. And the fact that there were guys in here instructing young kids and people were paying for it, I was blown away by it, but it gave me an idea. And I thought, whoa, hey, I can do this. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the beginning start of this kind of vision and mission, and what I'm tracking down now today.
Nearly 20 years ago, but I'm not gonna let you off the hook. We're gonna stay on. I want to hear more about SoCal. Tell me about SoCal. You're roughly my age, so SoCal in the 80s, as your kid. Tell me about that experience. What was that like as a kid? Just you're going to school, you're playing sports. What's that all about?
Well, I mean, obviously the weather's fantastic, right? So you're always outside running around and playing nonstop, right? When I was growing up, it was, I think for a lot of us, it was just basically if the sun was up, you're out playing all day, and whatever season it was, that was the sport you were playing. Now, to speak into the area that I grew up in, Riverside, it was a very, I would say, tough area, unique area. Now, when you grow up in that area, you didn't really realize it was tough because it was just the way life was. But it did instill a sense of personality and culture about how I viewed life, right? I mean, I bought my first mitt when I signed with LA out of high school, right? I mean, I didn't grow up owning my own bat. I mean, and my buddy Jake Maney got a bat, I got a bat, right? If somebody left the glove behind in our community and they forgot it, it became yours, right? So even the glove I had in high school was probably somebody I jacked at, freshman in high school or something along those lines. So the area produced a certain mindset and a certain culture, which in return I'm grateful for. Right, so the area was rough, but it was very competitive. And really the only way out of the area that I was in is either going to be through sports, either through like martial arts or fighting, or the other big element was like the drug. I mean, it was just gangs and drugs in the area I grew up in. So I was blessed enough to, be given a bit of athleticism that allowed me to get pulled out of that area, which then, of course, transitioned my thinking, my views on life. But the foundational aspect of Riverside, and I think what it did for me in terms of what was hard and that blue-collar, gritty, hey, if you see it, you better go get it. And there ain't nobody coming to save you, right? This is what it is. And I had to, at that point, start to see beyond where I was at to realize that I was much more than what I was doing. And that was the beginning kind of pull away and pro ball and then get into that whole environment. And then you're, of course, like any professional athlete, gets the I don't say any or all, but for me at least, looking side to side and for the first time, being a leader coming from that area into professional baseball, right? I was then kind of swayed. Things changed for me. But the culture and the area I grew up in, highly competitive, a lot of athletes come out of that Southern California area, but there's a unique grind and grit that comes out of that, which makes it unique because it was one of the things I discovered earlier on when I got to Alpharetta. I thought that there was a different culture, like we talked about. Like, there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of resources here. So the way, the uniqueness of how the youth thinks is a little bit differently than how I was raised and how I thought, if that makes sense.
For sure. Like, I'm stuck on this thing. Like, I grew up in, out in the country. It was pretty quiet. Wasn't worried about sort of gang turf wars. And, I'm just thinking about, like, it's bananas to me that that's something you had to even see or be a part of, like, just like witness and be around. Like, do you have any crazy high school stories of just like the not so positive stuff in Riverside?
Oh my, man, it's just based. I mean, shoot, when I was a kid, I'm talking about 10, 11, 12, they would have drive-by timeouts, man. We'd be out we're playing Little League Baseball and you're pop, pop, pop. Umpire would be like, time. Everybody look around. Is everybody okay? All right, we good. And we start playing again. It was just culture. It was just life, right? So even at 13, having bench clearing brawls and kids running around, I kid you not, I was on second base. And my coach and the third base coach of the other team, they just straight start scrapping. And they're fighting, going into the dugout. Kids are barreling out. I'm on second base. Hanging with my buddy
coaches? The coaches were scrapping?
Dude. Oh, my gosh. Dude, I can rip off 3 or 4 incidents of playing Little League. I'm not even in high school yet, of where – I mean, I'm talking about fights breaking out, coaches fighting, kids fighting on the field. It was just, like I said, way of life, man. It was just kind of what it was. So high school was just the maturity of this sense of culture, right? So when you got to high school, there was this super competitive edge to be able to compete and play, but everybody carried that element. Everybody had that element. So when we played, I look back at high school and I think of now, especially a sense of character on the field and baseball. We didn't know any of that, right? We just went out there to compete, and that was the main goal and objective. So we got into high school. It got just as we didn't have any. We didn't have any really kind of fights or anything along that way. And in high school, but it's what it produces from a mentality standpoint. Does that make sense? And that,
Yeah.
and I think that is and that, we talk about this, like, and I think that is one of the major things. Like, one of the mission statements we have in the organization that I discovered is it's not always about your ability, it's about your mentality. Right? It's not always about your ability, it's about your mentality. Because true mentality can deploy great things out of an individual. And you've got to harvest that. And that area made you start to grow from a mentality standpoint. You either believed that you could play or you were going to get crushed. You either believed in what you were doing or you were going to get bullied. And it was conversion of mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you have somebody that you looked to that was an example or a mentor as a kid that sort of like helped you avoid the negativity and stay with the competition?
You know what? I would say probably the most influential person in a unique way, right? There's two aspects of this. Number one, I grew up in a very faith-filled house. My parents loved the Lord. Phenomenal. And they loved it. And it instilled some anchors inside of me that had some principles. Now, when I went through my 6th grade and 7th grade, where I was off to do, drugs and gangs and all these things that were being thrown at me, my pops, this is the greatest influence. My dad pulled me out, took me to Taco Bell, sat me down, and gave me the conversation. That man right there was my inspiration. That man got up every single morning at 3 a.m. to drive to a job that he hated because he had to. My parents were married when they were in high school, because they ended up I have an older sister. She ended up getting pregnant. They got married. So my dad just had to get a job and do a job that he didn't want it, but he needed to because he was just being responsible. So when I grew up, man, my pops' nickname was the OG Pot Dog, right? I mean, when he spoke, there was wisdom, but he was calm in his approach. So when he took me out, he basically gave me an ultimatum. He says, hey, son, this is what I see is going on in your world. You're going down this direction. What in life do you love? What do you? And I'm like, well, I love sports, Dad. He's like, well, why don't you commit yourself mentally and fulfill your time with doing that versus this? And I remember him specifically not condemning me, knowing what I was doing in the distraction and the grades were failing and I was fighting and all this stuff was going on. But he just loved on me and just gave me a good insight. And after that one-on-one meeting with my pops, it set me into a different trajectory. I just decided, you know what? No, I want to compete. And I just naturally love to compete in anything and everything I did. It didn't matter, right? I mean, my 6th grade teacher called my mom up one day. She was like, hey, he's failing all courses. I said, no, dude, that teacher's lying. She's lying. There's no way I'm failing PE. I'm the best dang player in that class. She's lying, Mom. Hang up on her. I mean, true story. I'm like, hang up on her. She's lying to you. I'm the best athlete in that class. So that was probably the most influential person. And what ended up happening is as I began to grow in levels of success as a baseball player and a football player, I started to thrive off the energy of how it made my dad and my mom feel. Because remember, dude, we grew up with nothing. So all of a sudden, their son is having some level of success, some recognition. I'm being noticed, I'm being recognized, which in return, in that area, when you were athletically having a level of success, it kept you out of gangs. It kept you out of problems because you were socially accepted by everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody accepted you because you were kind of flying high in an arena, right? So I was really living a blessed life. But the real charge for me, if I can look back now, is that I truly loved to see my dad rejoice in the fact that his son was having success. And that was a drive for me. And I became hungry for that. I was like, ooh, I want more of that. I want more of that. So then in return, I started mentally visualizing in my own head about who I wanted to be. I wanted to be the best at this. I wanted to be the best. So I started setting these small, subtle goals that grew and grew and grew, right? So, I mean, I would say the influence was my pops, by all means. I mean, he just hit me with truth, loved on me, gave me the arena to grow, and then he was enough motivation because I loved the way he felt when he saw his son succeeding, and it drove me to want to be even better. And then I can go into I started vision casting as a kid. I started thinking differently, and that's again another secret sauce that we'll share here in a bit about what I think makes what we do a little bit different. It's kind of the principles of what I believe life is about.
You mentioned you're vision casting as a kid, but I'm assuming like nobody told you, hey, let me tell you what a vision cast is, son, and like
no,
right? You're assigning some sort of 2023 terminology to it, but back then, would you just say you were visualizing or dreaming? Is that or goal setting? Like, did somebody tell you to? Did somebody tell
No,
you to
man,
do this,
no.
or was this just something you started
No.
doing?
Man,
And what was
honestly,
on that?
it's a
Were you? I think you were probably mid to late '90s high school graduate. My guess is you were a three
correct.
sport guy. You were probably playing baseball,
Yep.
football, basketball. Am I close?
Correct, 100%. All
Okay,
three.
three sport guy. Now, you, how did you sort of land in the baseball track as opposed to the football, basketball track? Did you just see there was more talent on the baseball side?
Well, yes and no. I mean, let me go back to the original part you're talking about vision. That's exactly right. I didn't know what that word means, right?
Yeah.
But what it was is I was dreaming. And
You
those
were dreaming.
dreams are intentional. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, at what point do we want to tell kids not to dream? Like, dude,
Correct.
those are what's inside of you, right? And I was paying attention to what I was dreaming about. I wanted to be an exceptional athlete. I wanted to be the best player in school. Then I wanted to be the best player in the city. And then I wanted to be the best player in the county. Then I wanted to be the best player in the state. And then I wanted to be the best player in the country. All these dreams were just goals. And the fact that I had goals that were ahead of me, it created a path on where I wanted to go. So when I use the word vision, I can organize that thought by saying this to people. If you don't have a destination, then everything's an option. And because I discovered as a young man that I was dreaming and I was paying attention to these dreams, and these dreams were telling me, hey, there's these grand visions for you in my mind, in my heart, that, hey, you can do these things. And because I was dreaming those things and thinking those things, my life was a reflection of it. So when we leave these kids in this arena of sports and we tell kids, hey, no, you can't do it, who are you to say that to him?
That's
that he's carrying.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You were lucky enough to have a father who didn't say, no, you can't do that. Your dream is not possible. And the fact that he didn't say those things.
My dream was not at all. And you know what? My dreams that I had for me were bigger than what my family had for themselves. The vision was so expanded that my dad, and a lot of times, he always told me, he's like, I don't even know where you came from. You know, I was dude, my dad was in a band. My dad didn't play sports, right? Like, and then you got me who's just, completely hungry for, the competitiveness of it all. But it was the dreaming. And then what it is that dreaming set a beacon, it set a destination for me, which was key for me because it kept my life full of discipline. Because me knowing that I wanted to be the best at this and I wanted to pursue this, it made decision-making a lot easier. I knew what would and what would not get me there, meaning when I was growing up and drugs were an option or gangs were an option, this was an option, it didn't line up with my vision. It didn't line up with my dream. My dream was, hey, I want to be the best here. So what happens is it kept my decision-making on track. That is a crucial and absolute essential for a young man to start thinking beyond and see beyond their own eyes. When we start squashing dreams for kids saying, hey, well, you don't carry the ability. Okay, he might not, but it's the pursuit that he needs to go through. It's the training, it's the testing, it's the adversity that he has to go to realize either, A, that dream is not it, or that dream is that he's thinking is so much smaller than what God has really in store for him. It's just a pathway. There's one thing about life. If you're not moving, you ain't going nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. So you have to move towards something, right? So back to your question about all the sports, I was more recruited for football than I was baseball. So
hey, I was about to ask you about recruiting. I'm glad you mentioned that. So who was looking at you on the football side, and then I want to ask you about the baseball side.
I mean, everybody under the sun. I was one of the top recruits out of California. Got put in the High School Football Hall of Fame out of California. At that time it was the Pac-10, right? All the Pac-10 schools, some of the Big Sky, everything on the West Coast, right? So I ended up going on all my trips. I ended up verbally committing to be an Oregon Duck, but then I ended up signing with Cal Berkeley when Steve Mariucci left Green Bay. So I signed my football scholarship to go to Cal Berkeley when Steve Mariucci left the Niners to go coach there. And then I knew I was going to get drafted as a baseball player. And I told Cal, I was like, hey, if you guys let me play baseball there, then I'll go do both. Well, at that time, Coach Mariucci was not allowing that. He was like, you're going to be a one-sport athlete here. I was like, okay, great. But when the draft came around and I was going to get drafted, see, we didn't have the financial aspect of things were real, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that I was going to have a chance to get drafted and there was going to be some money thrown my way, that had a lot of influence, right? Because that was something we never had. So, right? So that was really the pending decision for me to go play baseball versus going to college to play football really had a lot setting around the financial aspect. Because I realized that, hey, I can play baseball for 5 or 6 years or 7 or 8, whatever, and I can go to school and still play football? Because at that time I didn't understand that. You remember when Chris Winkie was at Florida State? Was he at Florida
Sure.
State, Chris Winkie? Is that what it was?
Sure. He was probably 30 years old.
26.
Oh, yeah.
I
Is that
blown
okay?
away. I was like, you can do that? And I never knew that. So at that point as a young man, I go, okay, let me just run after this. And if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back to the school. I'll try to go back to school and play football. And that was part of the reason why I ended up retiring. I just thought, hey, I made a good run. I saw the writing on the wall. I needed to prepare myself for the exit, and I wanted to be the one who was the architect of the change. I didn't want change to come crush me because I wouldn't handle it well. I knew I wasn't going to handle it once they told me, hey, Jeff, it's over. You're released. You're not going to play no more. I wanted to exit on my own terms. So the financial aspect really swayed me to go play baseball versus the football thing, but it was the greatest gift that ever happened to me because baseball was the complete platform that completely unraveled my vision of myself. I played with consistent disappointment and failure, and I had to process that. I had to believe, in something that I wasn't experiencing. Oh my gosh, dude, baseball is so hard and yet so great and so wonderful at the same time, dude. It's the refinement of any competitive individual. If you think you're great, choose to play baseball. You will be humbled. That is a fact.
Yeah. Yep. It's if you can't figure out how to deal with failure, you won't last very long in this game. Not
Dude,
at all.
That's the differential between. Yeah.
So on the football side, you were being recruited by everybody under the sun. Now, a lot of kids today they don't realize a lot of that recruiting is taking place back then, senior year. On the baseball side, also was happening senior year. Were you in the same sort of recruiting buckets that you were in football on the baseball side?
Nope, absolutely not. Not one school. This is pretty interesting, right? So I get drafted by the Dodgers in the 10th round, but not one baseball school offered me. Not one.
That's interesting.
Because I was an unknown commodity. Because during the summertime when they would do stuff, I was playing football. So I didn't do, I played.
You weren't playing American Legion and stuff back then?
No, there was no travel. There was none of that. So really what kicked the doors open was just my high school. My high school, we put out, athletes nonstop, especially baseball players. There was 2 to 3 guys every year getting drafted, right? So when I was playing at my high school, I was in front of a lot of professional scouts because I had a lot of guys who were older than me who were being looked at. And then when we would play against other high-level guys, there was one particular event that threw me on the map. I ended up facing a guy named Randy Knoll who ended up being a top-round draft pick, and I ended up story's pretty awesome. I ended up hitting a bomb off him, and at that time, everybody was there to see him. But, of course, by me doing what I did against him, I shifted upon me. Now, that story's pretty awesome. I can share the story for another time, but it was at the end of that event, and I tell kids all the time, whenever you play the game, you have to discover what makes you unique. You cannot go out there and be just like everybody else. Meaning, when I would bust out the dugout, I was beating the pitcher in from center field. I was sprinting in and sprinting out. I have a policy within the Jacket organization that every fly ball you hit, you touch second base, right? Because I would be so angry when I would get out in high school and fly out, I would take my frustration out on the bases and just run. And sometimes those balls drop, and now you're sliding into second base, and you look like a freaking hero, right?
Yeah,
but
of course.
It's an expression of who you are, right? It's an expression of your character, expression of your work ethic. It's those type things, right? So those are some of the principles that I bring back to these guys here. I'm saying, hey, man, you've got to stand out. So there was no recruiting process for baseball. It was just you performed at the right time, very similar to today, right? You perform at the right time when the right people are there is going to open up doors. But now with technology and Twitter and film and profiles and you sending stuff out,
it's so different.
To be seen is so different.
But it's still it's not like
different.
You were it's not like you were unknown. You got drafted in the 10th round. It's crazy. I wonder if in the back of some of those coaches' minds, they were like, he's going to sign, and so there's no point in us even recruiting this kid. Like,
not at all, because you know what?
Or word is out, he's already got off.
Conversations.
And maybe he's got football in the back pocket. He's not going to be a baseball guy. It's such a strange piece of the story that's hard to wrap my head around.
But if you're not playing in events where people are going to be at to see you, then you're going to be unseen. There's so many athletes
of
out
course
there that are exceptional. They just can't get into the coach's office through the resources, through video or whatever. So when it came to football, my football coach was, setting videos up and putting together like the old school tape highlight things, and we were sending those out. old school stuff, right? And I went to a couple of like Reebok combines and did some events for numbers for the 40-yard dash and things of that nature. But for baseball, I never went to one college workout, one event, nothing, because football was my priority. I mean, baseball was a secondary thing that I played, but I loved football, loved it, and it just matched my personality.
And at the end of the day, baseball was going to write you a check. They were going to give you a paycheck, and you said, "Let's do it. Let's roll." Now, you ended up playing for a few years, like you mentioned. You didn't want to wait for them to kick you out of the dugout. You made the decision. I'm good with this. And you mentioned earlier in our conversation, at that point in time is when you ended up in Alpharetta with a sister. By total coincidence, she had somehow ended up in the Silicon Valley of baseball in Alpharetta, Georgia, and by just total coincidence, by just right spot, right time, you're sleeping on a couch in what eventually becomes the mecca of this baseball industry. And so you're sleeping on a couch, you're flipping some soft toss to some kids, you find your way inside some random indoor facility. Do you remember what facility that was 20 years ago or 20 plus years ago? What was it?
Yeah, it was called Hard Knocks. I was doing all my stuff.
Is that still
outside.
open?
When the weather was good, I was coaching outside. No, it's
is
not.
that
And then
Hard Knocks?
When the weather got bad, I went. Hard Knocks was the name of it. So when the weather got bad, I went into Hard Knocks and I would rent space out. And then when the weather was good, I would go back outside.
Gotcha.
So
Shout out to Hard Knocks.
There we go, baby. And I want to say those guys from up north. I mean, they may close the doors a handful of years back, but they provided an opportunity for me. That's for dang sure. No doubt.
If
they
nothing
allowed me
else,
to at least have a tendency to grow something in winter. Mm-hmm.
They let you grow, and also they let you're in there, kind of getting to see behind the curtain a little bit too. I'm imagining. So eventually, you take your lessons away from Hard Knocks. Where did you end up going?
All right, so this is the whole thing, right? So when I started doing this company, when I left that indoor facility, it gave me the idea. I put my baseball card on a flyer. Okay, I made a flyer. Now, when I left professional baseball, I left broke and broken, both. Right? Spent my money, was a complete fool, did not manage it well, and then broke mentally, right, to the fact of who I was going to be. So when I was in Alpharetta, when I started this thing, I was broken, bro. I made flyers, and they weren't color; they were black and white because that's all I could afford. Right, and I went out and pumped them on. I put them on windshield wipers at all the local parks. It took me 4 months to get my first phone call. So I would go out every single day and start putting flowers on windshield wipers. And I got 1 call, to 2 calls, to 3 calls, to 4. And then I would go out to these teams and I would volunteer my time. Right. So here's some business stuff here. Right. I would volunteer my time with these teams because I knew what I wanted to serve, what I felt I knew to serve. Nobody cared because they didn't know who I was. So I would go out to these team practices. And I knew, hey, I'm going to volunteer my hours and my time for free so that these people can know what I'm carrying, right, what I know. And then from that, I knew I was going to walk away with 2 or 3 lessons. So it started off for the first 2 to 3 years, me just outside doing lessons. And when I went indoors to Hard Knocks, that was where when the weather was bad, it was rain, I would leave space out of there, then I would go back outside. Now, the big breakthrough of this whole thing, right, which is really what has kind of expanded this operation to where there being 5 fields now and 3 indoor facilities. I was about 8 years in a big defining moment, and the Hard Knocks guys were realizing, because I was now expanding. I had 3 or 4 guys that were working with me. I started to discover my purpose within teaching. I realized earlier on when I was doing one-on-one lessons that what I was serving had nothing to do with what I did as a baseball athlete. Meaning, when I first started coaching kids, I was lying and exaggerating to them, bro. I was still so broken and so insecure that I was still exaggerating to them on what I thought I needed, what I thought they needed to hear that I did that I didn't. So when can you give me like an example of something that you might have exaggerated? Were you talking about like your own personal stats or something like that? Yeah, it could have been stats, could have been accomplishments. Like saying, oh yeah, me expressing the fact that, hey, I got a little bit of time here in the big leagues, this and that. It was just insecurity, and it never happened. Right? I got some stuff in spring training. It was an expression of an identity of my own insecurities that I felt that I needed to still live. I still needed to live up to something, and that was the tension for me. And the great thing about it, I had a buddy that I played pro ball with who called me out. He was like, dude, come on. This is kind of like before Google, right, where you could really research somebody.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, it's just a heart issue, man. Like that's within me. And what I discovered was this, and this is for the people, for us talking to me, we're going to know that I love God. What I discovered was this. The value that I was serving had nothing to do with what I accomplished. It had everything to do with what I didn't accomplish. When I was able to take my insecurities and my failures as an athlete and then connect with the kid, I had the ability now to connect because I saw them differently. It wasn't as if they needed to find me and be like, I need to live with Coach Auterson. What I needed to do is I could find them. So when they came in with a struggle and a sense of pain and this and that and the other, I could connect with that. And through that connection, I found purpose. I realized that it wasn't just baseball. It was about the personal relationship that you were instilling and getting involved with this kid. It was bigger than baseball. And that was the beginning of the secret sauce. I started realizing, man, this can't be transactional. This has got to be personal. How can you make this personal? And as that element started to grow, that vision and that idea, I started serving that to other men who were leaving the game of baseball, who were then coming on board to participate in the vision that I had. And I was basically telling them, hey, you need now. This is where you take the things that you want to bury the most and you serve the most. So God took my greatest insecurities and made them my strengths, bro. And all of a sudden now the value of what I was serving had nothing to do with just baseball. It had to do with the relationship. It had everything to do with going beyond the game, the conversations, the encouragement, all these other elements that were happening inspired the young man that they were much more than how they saw themselves. They were now leaving feeling good. And I was like, that's it. That's it. That's the sauce. So then I started serving that out to all the men with me saying, hey, man, this is a secret sauce. Don't make it about you, right?
Yeah.
Share with them. Share with them. Connect with them. Don't make it transactional. Make it personal. And if you can do that, you'll be successful in this business. And as time went on, 8 years into it, I'll work real quick here. This guy shows up, has a son that's 7 years old. It's wintertime. We're at this local park, and I got snow gloves on. I'm doing lessons with him. He drops his business card on me, and he goes, hey, I got this piece of property on. I got a building on it. I'm not sure if you're interested. And I thought to myself this time, I was in a big defining moment. I needed to find somewhere to work. I needed to find a place. And I remember telling myself, all right, I'm going to drive out and see this guy. I pull up to this piece of property, beautiful piece of land, a house on it, this old building on it, like a barn where he bought from this guy was construction building. I walk in there, and he's walking me through it all. And I'm like, well, it can work. It can't work. There's walls. He's like, what if we cut down these walls? We do this, do that. And I'm thinking to myself, is this guy for real? And then a week goes by, this guy calls me up and goes, the saws and hammers have started. I'm like, what? I go down with my family. This guy's gutting this building. I don't even know this man. I worked with the 7-year-old son twice. And I look at him and I go, dude, I should be a part of this. He's like, man, don't worry about it. It's not about the money. It's about doing for others. And right then was my confirmation. Then I was like, ooh, what'd you just say? And this guy proceeds to build an indoor facility, then starts brainstorming out loud, talking about, hey, I want to build, what do you think about building a field? And I'm like, don't brainstorm out loud. The next week, this guy's got 4 earth movers out there scraping 70,000 yards of dirt and builds the field. This man, moved in my direction, built an indoor facility, built the field, then handed it over to me and said, now go be a good steward of this gift. Now I'm going to go back a second. When I was in my 1-bedroom apartment with a mattress on the ground, putting flyers and windshield wipers, trying to figure out what I was going to do and who I was going to be, I prayed at that moment. I said, God, I'd like to have a baseball facility someday. And you know what? I'd like to have a baseball field. Now, I'm living in my 1-bedroom apartment with a mattress on the ground. That's an impossible dream. That's impossible. That's an impossible dream. But I'm going to tell you this. Expectation is a cup that God will fill up. I casted it out there. I told him about it. 8 years later, this guy shows up, builds me an indoor facility in a field that says, now go be a good steward. Now that is the beginning of the story. And
it's incredible.
Go ahead. Yeah, and what continues to ensue is there's now another field being built. And then now there's a American Legion field. It's a high school field that I sit down and they slide this contract over to me and they go, hey, Jeff, this is your field for the next 30 years. Go be a good steward. And all of a sudden, all this ready for this? The dreams that we call vision castings and me throwing up impossible things and handing them over and expecting and ready, living my life and moving in the direction of expectation for it to arrive, even though it's impossible. Whether it shows up or it doesn't show up, these things arrive. So now you can tell that as the company grew through these gifting, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 indoor facilities, 5 fields, and I own none of them. I just manage them. And through that managerial type idea, right? That was kind of like, I'm just a steward. And in return, this thing has expanded into, obviously, our teams. The Jackets now are, whatever, I think at 32 teams. And we do it through a mentorship program. Nobody gets to coach a Jacket team until they've been under a year of mentorship, because just because you played doesn't mean you can lead, right? We got to start placing guys in their area of gifting and try to put them in an arena where they can fly, they can soar, they can serve, they can give. So really, we can get hands into the Jackets and what we do and the philosophies around it and, the failures and the struggles of it all. But the overall big mission is to encourage men to make war with who they are so they can become somebody they've never been. That's my mission for coaches.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time. Back up 2 seconds and say it one more time.
Yep. So the mission, because there's multiple missions here. The one mission for men, coaches, dads, people involving themselves with the youth, is my mission for the men, for the growth of them, including myself, is for them to make war with who they are so they can become somebody they've never been. Everything great within us is on the other side of that war. It's on the other side of that fear. And our ability to serve and be vulnerable in travel ball baseball, where in travel ball, all the parents in the stands want gallon barrels of grace poured upon their kids' play, want them playing every minute of every game. But as a leader and as a coach, you're only going to get teaspoons. They don't give a rip, right? Yeah. They care, but they don't care, because the most important thing on the field is their child, and it should be that way. So to lead in that arena, you need to start making war with who you are so you can be confident and comfortable in your leadership skill set so you can lead effectively. Because leading these teams is like running a business, man. I mean, there's 12 different kids, and the objective is to meet all of them. And the goal is for those kids not to find you. You need to find them. Each kid's uniquely different, if that makes sense, right? You have some kids that will have a bad game and get in the car and drive home, and mom and dad are destroying them. You don't need it. You need to be hard on that kid when you lead them. You need to love on that boy. You need to affirm that boy. You need to love that boy. And you have some guys that need a kick in the butt, right? Who are way more than what they're producing, but they just have a poor self-concept. So you might lean a little bit harder on that guy. So all these elements of guys making personal development in their own walk and their own growth will allow them to lead the younger boys, younger men, younger adults, etc. So that aspect for the men aspect is to make war with who you are, to become somebody you've never been. And then in return for the youth, my mission statement for the youth is to instill in them that they are much more than how they see themselves. That I believe that every kid, every human being is uniquely gifted, and they carry that gift on the inside of them. But only the right mentality, only the right belief system can deploy that gift. Don't think you'll ever rise above how you see yourself. If you don't like who you are, you're in trouble, man. Like, you've got to start tapping into a greater source to grow personally, because as you grow, everything else around you grows, and everything else around you changes. If that makes any sense. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. I was about to. It's an interesting point to bring up right now, because I'm thinking about how much getting past ego had such an impact on your life, and just sort of created this opportunity for. I mean, there was some good luck in there, right? But had you held on tightly to ego, none of this might have happened. But at the same time, what you just said, you still have to have a positive outlook on yourself, right? Which maybe is the definition of ego in a way.
It is unique, right? And people who are hearing this, it's from coming from, like you said, from a place of self-confidence. If you're a believer, if you're a non-believer, either way, your life will reflect exactly how you see yourself. That is it. That's just the facts, right? So my ego, you hit it on the head. If it wasn't for God, for me and my walk, him chipping away at my ego, none of this would have existed, because I was so prideful, and I still battle with that, right? Yeah. As soon as I start to rise up a little bit, I start thinking, look at me go. Look at me go. Look at me. And God's like, whoa, hold up, man. Hold up. You think putting flyers on windshield wiper was a good business idea? That was me. You think that field being built and that facility being built, you think that was you? No, that was me. You think these other 3 fields that have popped up and built, people have invested into this vision, you think that was you? No, that was me. Yeah. The reality is for any individual, when I started to serve to the community, to men, to people, meaning, this is my favorite Proverbs, bro, okay, is this. Your gift will make room for you, and it will bring you in front of great men. See, the thing is this. When I discovered that people weren't looking for me, they were looking for what I was carrying, that was the beginning of my process. When I had to step and say, they're not looking for Jeff. They're looking for what's on the inside of me, meaning if I got around people and they felt inspired or encouraged, I started to recognize that, hey, that's my gift. My gift is I can inspire people to become more than how they see themselves. I can inspire people. And when I discovered that gift within me, I started to sharpen and refine that gift. And then I started to serve that gift, right? And when I started to serve that gift, I started giving that away. That, again, that falls in line with, I think, you begin to attract things. You start to attract, like the ego. That's been my thorn. That's a continuation of my thorn in my side. I have to personally, man, stay as humble as I can, because I can boast up and flex up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I can boast up and flex in a heartbeat, thinking it's all about me, man, and that's my thorn. And I definitely got to stay in that humble state, because without that, there's no way I would have received or been given what I have now if I couldn't understand where it came from. But this is just me and my own thoughts, right? For the people hearing this, they can process it and categorize it as good luck. They can categorize it being fortunate. They can categorize those things. But what's unexplainable is undeniable to me, because it was something that was happening to me. You know what I'm saying? So all I can do is speak to what I know to be true to me. And then, like we're talking now, sharing it out and saying, hey, take what you like, throw out what you don't like. But at the end of the day, you're never going to rise above your own, self-concept. You've got to make sure you're doing some personal work on you always. Always. It's
such a you talked about early on in that process, and it's such a funny thing that guys, and maybe ladies, I don't know, but like the way that you talked about inflating sort of your story, it was probably some 10-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid. You didn't need to do that, but for some reason we tell ourselves we do, right? And it was on the other side of realizing that you don't, is when things begin to grow and to prosper like that.
That's right.
Whether you played in the big leagues or played high school baseball is irrelevant to you helping that kid find his swing and find his confidence in his swing. You know what I mean? Like it's such a strange trick we play on ourselves.
It's like a self-worth game, dude. We feel like we're not worthy of it. I can't do it. I didn't do this, so I'm not really going to be. No, man. And that's what I'm talking about, self-concept. When you start connecting to a higher source and realizing that, hey, you're good enough, and you start there, and you start looking inwardly at the things that you are unique and what you can sharpen and what your gifts are, and you start serving that, value comes. And for people who are trying to be successful in this business, and I'm not saying I have the answers by any means, is that money runs value down. You've got to discover within yourself what you're going to serve and what you're going to produce. And in return, if people want what you're carrying, they'll come looking for it.
It's funny. It's funny you keep saying this word. You keep saying this word serve, and by coincidence, I'm on your foundation's website. It's called the Your Pitch Foundation, and in big letters, big cursive letters, it says Life Mentorships, and then it talks about a life mentorship program mission, becoming a leader, serving, and impacting the next generations. Can you just talk about your pitch and and expand upon what I just read off the website?
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool, man. So, earlier on when we were doing this, there's one thing about travel ball baseball is that there's a major financial commitment for all the families to be able to do it. And it's crazy. And I'm in it. And it's expensive, unbelievably expensive to be able to do it. The resources, facilities, fields, coaches, etc. Now, the Your Pitch Foundation kind of gave birth because if I was playing baseball today, there's no way I'd be able to play travel ball. My parents would never be able to afford it. So when I first started this whole kind of, the Jackets and Auterson baseball, we were doing the travel ball, I was helping and assisted families financially, personally, right? And what happened is, like anybody else, man, I went through a freaking heavy, heavy storm, a heavy, heavy life storm that about killed me, okay? Business-wise, emotional-wise, family-wise, I went through a storm. And on the back end of the storm, I discovered something, right? And it gave birth to things that I was most afraid of. And people are always sharing with me, hey, maybe you can start a foundation, get a 501c3, this, that, or the other. But it was an element that I was unaware of, nor did I really know how it worked. But because of the storm that I went through, it gave birth to the Orphanage Foundation. And I thought, we're going to do this. And what it does is we do financial aid for families in youth sports. It could be any sport whatsoever, right? We do community service, coaching, youth mentoring programs, service projects, because what I discovered is that there's a way for people to serve and to be able to give that can impact the next generation. And there were a lot of people in this Silicon Valley area that people call Alpharetta that have the means to be able to give. And there were so many people that we were supporting as they went through the organization who got into college, into pro ball, who experienced something that came back around and said, Jeff, I want to give to this because of what it did for us. I want to give to this vision because of what my son's experience was with you and for the mentorship. And dude, this game is beyond baseball. When you're getting calls because kids are in the hospital, when you're getting calls to go meet and to go speak at schools, it's so much more than that. So the foundation was given birth to help come alongside facets of financial aid for families. And we do about I think last year we did about $25,000 in financial aid for financial support for families to be able to play travel ball. Like in all aspects, from local parks to people, community service aspects. So it was kind of the underlining foundation of what you hear me saying, but it allowed me to platform to get people involved to help serve and give and tell stories about how they're impacting lives. Because I'm telling you, man, that's where purpose follows. When I discovered what I was doing wasn't about when I discovered what I'm doing right now wasn't about me. I discovered purpose.
I mean, don't be surprised if somebody hears this. They hear your energy. Your contagious energy, and hopefully somebody picks up the phone and calls you. Speaking of calling you, I should always do this at the beginning of the call, but it's AutersonBaseball.com, and it's Auterson BSBL at Auterson BSBL over on Twitter. And we haven't talked about it much, but we'll talk about it now. It's let's see. Over on Twitter at Georgia Jackets. Let's talk Georgia Jackets for a second. I mean, this is travel ball talk. We haven't really talked much about travel baseball, but the Georgia Jackets are the team side of Auterson baseball. So you're hanging out in a barn that some guy you barely knew hooked you up with, and you got a field out back.
Yep.
You're doing lessons. You're doing training. At some point, I'm assuming there's probably some other guy, maybe the same guy, who's like, hey, can you spin up a team that we can put our boys on? It's kind of a normal story. So at what point in the journey of coaching in this barn did the first team pop up?
That's correct. The gentleman that owned the field was kind of the ambassador behind that. So they had a small travel team, like 8, 9 when they started up, and they were doing their thing. And I wasn't coaching because I wanted to stay out of the travel ball business as much as possible. But I knew eventually I was going to get pulled into it. So right around 12, I started spending more time with this one team that they had. And then at 13, I ended up taking that group over, and then we ended up, collaborating with another group of boys, another team that was, they were called the Bandits at the time, and they were remarkable. They were loaded up with some alpha males. They were highly successful, for all the years. And we played against them. Well, we ended up kind of combining squads and merged up, and that was the launch of the Jackets ultimately because that team was so successful. They were like ranked number 1 in the country for like 3 or 4 years that we had them together, and it put the Jackets on the map, right? You start having success like that, people are looking at it. And I was just fortunate enough to have a lot of really good athletes, right? I had a lot of guys that went on to do a lot of awesome things on that team. So that was the start of it. And that was when I discovered like the relationship with the parents and the leadership and coaching and travel ball and the, grace being poured upon their play and how it is for a coach and what you're doing. And then from that, I started realizing for me, hey, there's something here, right? There's something here. But I told myself if it took me going against the grain of the game, I would. Meaning, God bless it, man. Travel ball is so awesome in so many ways, but the viewpoint of that every single kid is going to make it to the big leagues and have a golden scepter for the rest of their life is just the greatest lie of all time. It's like every single big league guy still has to be a husband, father, a dad. They got to be all that. And when I look at the game of baseball, I want these kids to achieve. And we got, 400, 500 guys in college. We got a bunch of guys in pro ball. We've been doing it for so long now. The element of baseball is so cool, right? It just started with that one team, and then every year, we would do like a mentorship program. I would have an assistant coach who'd be with me and try to understand our culture and what we're doing. You bring your greatness into this culture. Here's a team for you. Next guy. And we just slowly but surely each year started building teams off leaders, not off the draw. Because we'll have a try and we'll have 100 people showing up for 2 teams, right? And if I had the ability to have 100 leaders, I would do it. But it has to be done off of leadership. So I do the best I can. And, of course, we fail, and baseball's emotional, and guys, including myself, are going to fail and do things that they shouldn't do on the field, etc. But that was the beginning growth of it. I just realized, hey, number one, the leaders are important. We have the kids that want to play, but I got to make sure the mentorship and people who are leading these boys understand some things. Like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. This is our culture. This is our direction. Now bring your greatness into this culture and go change some lives. And it just slowly but surely started to grow. And then all of a sudden it gets, baseball gets uberly competitive. We're in a highly competitive area. There's so many organizations around here competing. And that was another process for me, like looking side to side. What's this guy doing? What's this guy doing? And you got the, people going at players, and people are calling you, and just travel ball. But it started with one. And today we're at, I think, 31 teams.
That's incredible. That's, man, like you kick the ego to the side, and people just, by total coincidence, started popping up into your life. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny how that works sometimes?
Yeah. Absolutely.
We may need to bring you back and do a part 2, for sure, because I think we could do this all day long. And I kind of, on the one hand, I don't want to ask you one more question because I know we could go another hour. But on the other hand, well, let me ask you. It is we've been at this about 50 minutes. It's 10:15 a.m. right now. Do you have somewhere you need to go in the next 10, 20 minutes, or can you go one more question?
Nope. Yeah,
you good?
More question. Yeah, fire away.
All right, let's do. Oh, then if you can do one, you could do 2. Let's do first one. First one is just like quick, maybe quick. We won't go too deep into it. Give me a book or a movie or website, some kind of resource that you share with the people in your life, whether it's coaches, players, parents. What's a resource, a book, website, movie, something like that you find yourself sharing with people?
Man, I don't even know in reference to that, man. The only book that I pretty much marinate my time in, man, is the Bible, to be honest with you, bro. I mean, I marinate there. There's so many secrets in it, man. So really, there's nothing really I spend a whole lot of time on in terms of baseball. I don't really have websites that I go to that I study on. I mean, that's probably a question I don't have much substance on outside of, I just spend a lot of time of trying to work on discovering, things that make me a better person.
Yeah.
Like the days in itself are hard enough, man. I'm just working on those things. So I don't really have anything too significant to offer people out there in terms of resources outside of,
well, the Bible. I think the Bible is the number 1 bestseller in the history of the world. So that's it's pretty good one, I guess.
I agree. Yeah, pretty good one. I appreciate that. Solid source.
And okay, so this question will possibly pull a little more out of you. What is one change that could be made to travel baseball that would have the biggest positive impact?
If they had a way to turn travel ball itself into like a league versus tournaments on the weekend, it'd be tenfold better for the players, for the kids, and for their development. These tournaments that are set up strictly on the weekends where you play 2 games, you get into bracket, and if you win, great, you keep winning. If you lose, but it's so extensive. In terms of the development, if you had a situation where, imagine how it was for us growing up, like Rhett, you had games. If you had games throughout the week, would allow guys to play and develop guys without the pressure of being in a tournament where you have to win, which in return, it's not going to pour a whole lot of grace into a lot of other kids' opportunity on the field because you're managing the games to win, right? So guys are producing. So I think there can be a better way. I'm just not saying taking tournaments away at all. I think they're awesome. I think they're great. I think you can get a lot of talent in one location. But I think if there was a way to extend a travel ball type league where people bought into, it would take care of arms. It would help with injuries. So the guys going out there and throwing 100 pitches in one game, then go out and play shortstop the next game or catch or whatever. Like, if you were able to space it out and it allowed guys to still grow and develop, and there's dudes that you have on your team who are alpha males, right? Say they're guys that can throw the mess out of the ball, but they just can't throw strikes. There's got to be a window of time where those guys get shots to develop. right?
Yeah.
But when you're playing in tournaments over the weekend, you might not be throwing a lot of those guys, right? So I think a league look where the games are expanded out, you still have tournaments, but you can spread it out, part of the development, I think would be tenfold, man.
Well, this
tenfold.
is fun when an answer pops up like this, and I think it's a great answer. And this is the type of answer that gives me the opportunity to turn it around on you and say, cool, go do it. You can do this. Like, you literally can do this. You could, because first of all, you've proven that things that you attempt, you can succeed at. And second of all, you're in a target-rich environment with a gazillion teams. And so you could do this. Like, I have full confidence that by this time next year, maybe not this summer, maybe not summer 2024, but summer 2025, you can be the GM of the new travel ball league in the greater Atlanta metro area. And if you need a model, look to my friends in Northern Virginia, the NVTBL. They do this already.
Okay.
They do this already. I'll send you. That's Rob Haney, is an awesome guy out of Northern Virginia who kind of spearheads this. And it's not like you just said. It's not a replacement for those weekend events. It's in addition to. But you might see a team choose to, instead of doing 8 tournaments straight on every weekend, you have the ability to say, hey, let's pick those like bigger, more important, like target rich tournaments that we want to go to, and then we're going to fill the rest of the summer with this league. So yeah, this is totally doable. Like, if you don't do it, I'm not going to be mad at you, but it's something I think you have the ability to spin up. I think you can do it. I really do. So I'm challenging you to, the Atlanta Metro Georgia Travel Ball League, right there. I don't know if that name rolls off my tongue quite well, but we can work on the name later. And I'll send you the info to the NVTBL. You can take a peek at it. They've got different, it's broken down by age group, and and they're going to adjust their schedule based on, hey, is this a 12U team or is this a 16U team, right? And because that one age group is going to approach it a little bit differently. But it's so funny. Like, man, I agree with you. I think the league play is awesome. I think the kids sitting around all week waiting till Friday or Saturday to play is kind of silly. We should be playing more games. The IQ, the baseball savviness has gone down because kids are doing a lot more one-on-one instruction as opposed to actually out there on a baseball field, like watching situations happen. And by playing games, that's where you learn your baseball IQ. That's where you get your savviness from. Man, love this. Had so much fun. I want to have you back on. We're going to continue our own private conversations, hopefully often. I'm gonna bring this to a close. Do you have any parting shots that, if there's any coaches or parents or players that are still listening, that you would like to share with them before we stop the recording?
No, man, I just appreciate your time. I enjoyed it. I did, really did.
Well, thank you. I'm going to be looking forward to sharing this with people. I think there's going to be a lot of people that like getting to know you, like getting to know your energy as I have. So, looking forward to sharing this with the world. It will be eventually on playinschool.com/Auterson. That's AUTERSON. So, don't hang up. I'm going to stop the recording right there. Thank you, Coach.